All right, testing 1 2, testing 1 2 3. Yeah, cool. What's up, everybody? My name is Dorian Wallace, and this is just kind of an introductory episode of a podcast that I'm starting. I've been wanting to do one for a long time, just about shit that I'm interested in, and sounds kind of vague if you don't know me. If you do know me, it makes a lot of sense. I'm into a lot of things, and I like to just talk and communicate with my fellow human beings. But just a little bit of an introduction on who I am and what I do, and why this might be an interesting podcast to check out further episodes on as it goes along. So first and foremost, I'm a composer and a pianist and a music therapist, and that may not seem like the most interesting space to begin any kind of dialogue with lots of people or with lots of subject matters, but I promise you it is. So get this. I've been playing piano since I was about 4 years old, and I've been composing music, give or take, since I was around 7 years old, and I'm now a 36-year-old man. So it's been a long time, and I'm really primarily self-taught musician and artist. Though I come from an incredibly musical family. My mom is a professional pianist, and my dad is a singer and a composer, specifically in the world of barbershop. My sisters are in a successful barbershop quartet. My younger brother is a percussionist. My brother-in-law is a jazz saxophonist, and my wife is a violinist. And so I've been around music for a really long time, and I have had lessons here or there, but for the most part, a lot of it was learning music by ear. And then regarding I guess, like, what kind of music I'm interested in, a lot of people will say, like, hey, I'm into every music, or I like everything. What do you listen to? I listen to everything. I can promise you all that I make an honest attempt to listen to everything. But just to give some basic ideas on where my musical foundations come from. When I was a younger kid, I was really, really, really blown away by the late Romantic era composers, as well as the early 20th century composers. So these are artists like Bela Bartok and Igor Stravinsky, Sergei Rachmaninoff, Charles Ives, Dmitri Shostakovich, Arnold Schoenberg. This shit was my jam for a long time. I also went through a major phase in my teenage years being interested in metal music, in various forms of just more of the extreme side of rock music. So, I went to a lot of punk rock shows and a lot of death metal shows, and was in a band for a long time. And, so that was a very informative period of my life. But it expanded because I eventually did go to college for music composition. And while I was there, really began to realize that I'd been improvising my entire life, but in the formal academic world of music, improvisation is not as coherent of an outlook on how to express oneself. And so, I just really started to fall into jazz music and funk music and reggae and all of the musical forms that really grew out of the American blues tradition, and just got deeper and deeper into improvised music. And that eventually led to being really into hip hop music and all of these sorts of things. And so anyways, moral of the story is that's like a really brief overview of that. I really like a lot of shit. And there are a lot of people, a lot of artists that I've met over my career as a composer and as a musician, performing musician, that are just have a lot of really, really great perspectives. And so I'll be having some friends on, having some colleagues on. Some you may have heard of, some you may have not. But it's really just to shoot the shit and talk about anything from mundane concepts to really, really deep existential issues. So to expand onto that, so I'm a relatively eclectic composer, and pianistically tend to float around improvised music. But something that adds a little bit of examination into all of this is so I come from a working class background, and now keep in mind, I never saw myself as a member of the working class necessarily when I was there, because their class consciousness is a major issue. It's a major issue that needs to be expanded upon and explored and all these sorts of things. But basically, to put it this way, the majority of the friends that I grew up with never went to college and never got a degree. A lot of them went to work in various other forms of labor, whether it be factory work or warehouse work or restaurant work. And at least at the time of recording this podcast, I've had at least 7 friends die in their 20s due to heroin addiction. And so, all of that to say that I never actually finished my degree in music composition at Kent State. I ended up dropping out, and I joined the Army. And that's a whole other world, but it was really through the world, through the lens of becoming a member of the U.S. military, I started to meet a lot of different kinds of people, from various walks of life. Hung out with a lot of dudes that were former gangbangers in various inner city spaces. Hung out with a lot of hillbillies, a lot of people who grew up on a farm. Hung out with people who were cops or came from a law enforcement family. Just got to meet a lot of differing people from a lot of differing backgrounds. And the other major transition that took place during the Army years was I had actually come into the military as a conservative Republican, and really started to transition the awareness that I was actually more aligned with the quote unquote libertarian right, while being a member of the military, mostly because I started to realize the real human consequences of war, and the real human consequences of American imperialism. And all of this really started to change even further when I really realized that I actually wasn't conservative at all. And came to realize that I am actually a socialist. And, you know, to get into the specifics of what kind of socialist, that's kind of an always transitioning, always shifting and growing experience. But, you know, to really summarize, I tend to be some synthesis of anarchist and Marxist, as well as an advocate for social democratic policies, and am willing to organize with people from all over the spectrum. But another major shift that took place was the killing, I'll call it the murder of Michael Brown, and by police officer Darren Wilson. And this was an eye-opening experience for a lot of reasons. The first of which was, to me, it was completely clear that what had taken place was at work, or at least an accident, but at worst a murder, a calculated murder. And just really realizing that there was no accountability for the police officers involved. But what became even more apparent was the horrific justifications that I began to really notice amongst my conservative upbringing, and a lot of basically a lot of the takes that people that I had known and loved were taking the side of the oppressor. And the way I've been describing it for a long time, and will continue to describe it, is it's embarrassing that it took me that long to realize the advantages that my skin color and my gender presentation and my sex and all of these factors, it began to really become insightful what the concept of privilege and oppression really is. And it's embarrassing that it took so long to realize it. But it began a transition of, okay, I have a modest platform as a composer and a performer. It is small. It tends to exist in the contemporary classical and or jazz world. But I still have a social media following. I still have people that come to my concerts, and I have a moral obligation to use my platform for social change. So both of these factors really began to become a shift in the way that I was approaching music. Music became a spiritual practice as well as a communication, communication medium to express larger ideas, something bigger than what language itself can utilize. And to get into a little bit deeper, it also started to change my priorities. A lot of musicians get into this mindset that music is the only way in which we can make money. In part due to the working class background that I never really realized was a working class background, and in part with the realization of working in the US Army, and in part with the realization that music is more important than just a means of income. I eventually added on to this career trajectory the path to getting a degree in music therapy. And yeah, so a little bit about, what the fuck music therapy is. Well, the really short version is I had the realization that I needed to be responsible with music. It could not just be a masturbatory experience of making music for myself and to express myself, though that's still very much a part of music making. But it had to be doing something to benefit others as well. So the way that music therapy is defined is music therapy is the clinical and evidence-based use of music interventions to accomplish individualized goals within a therapeutic relationship by a board-certified music therapist. Music therapy can be practiced individually or in groups, often in collaboration with other therapies, treatments, or pharmaceuticals. Music therapy involves listening to, reflecting on, and creating music with the goals of improving a person's health and well-being. Immersion in music can support people in more easily expressing themselves, uncovering and managing complex emotions, strengthening and attaining emotional intelligence and release. Anyone can benefit from music therapy, but I specialize in treating people who are experiencing the following: anxiety or depression, grief or trauma, difficulty sleeping, focusing, burnout, and secular spirituality. Which I actually don't even know if I agree with that anymore. I just realized that's something I read. Okay, yeah, that's something I read that I wrote a long time ago, and I need to change on my website because the real areas that I really began to put my focus on is facing work, doing work with activists and political radicals who are facing burnout. Working with anti-war veterans or conscientious objectors or anti-war service members, especially people suffering with PTSD or traumatic brain injury. I'm also very intrigued with exit counseling, which is a form of therapy to help individuals who were involved or are involved with cults or hate groups or insular communities or experiencing religious disaffiliation. And I also do a lot of help within the irreligious communities. So people who may identify as atheists or agnostics or humanists. Yeah, and music therapy has really changed a lot of the ways that I have started to view the use of music and the impacts of music. First and foremost, music has been a part of the human experience since the Paleolithic era. The moment we were making a sound with our mouth that was beyond an innate animalistic sound, but something to express something deeper or larger, that is really when we started singing. And the moment we became consciously aware of making rhythm, with our hand maybe hitting a stone or hearing sticks clap together, we became aware of rhythm. And so we really became musical beings around the same time. We were developing language and we were developing abstract concepts like mathematics and dance and all of this. So that's one factor. Another factor is just the realization that in a capitalist system, we do not really engage with the left hemisphere of our brain as well. Sorry, I fucked that up. We engage almost solely with the left hemisphere, which is the language center of the brain, whereas we do not engage with the right hemisphere nearly as much, which is where more abstract concepts come from. And so music therapy is a way to really, with intention, engage with the other hemisphere of the brain that we often leave dormant and unfulfilled, especially in a capitalist system. So I guess just to kind of finalize this music therapy segment, there is two areas that I'm actually working on papers on right now, and I'm also meeting a lot of really cool people through. But the first is applying left-wing radical politics, political theory of anarchism and Marxism through a therapeutic lens, through a musical therapeutic lens, as a way to start to reformat not only the way we engage with a client one-on-one, but in fact the way we engage with society as a whole and the culture as a whole. And I can get into all of this much later. But the other area is I have a particular interest in engaging with members or people afflicted by far-right ideas, paleoconservatism, fascism, Nazism, all of these things. So the other paper I'm working on, the working title right now, is called Music Therapy as an Anti-Fascism. And it's the beginning of a dialogue exploring the use of hate music and fascistic ideas and how people fall victim to these ideas, and how we can utilize music therapy in a productive way to help fascists leave fascist groups, and become accountable for any actions that they may have participated in. And the idea is that this podcast is going to get deeper and deeper into all of this stuff. So this is really just an introduction. To get a little to keep moving on. There's also a lot of interest in labor organizing, specifically some of the work happening within music worker organizing. So I'm a member of the New Music Organizing Caucus, which is a contemporary classical music caucus that is engaged with labor rights within the new music scene. New music, for those that are not quite hip to the term, is basically the term we use for contemporary classical music. So people who are writing music that is in the tradition of European classical music, or at least is coming from that lineage in some way, shape, or form, but the contemporary realm of it, or the contemporary existence, and really finding camaraderie and solidarity with our fellow comrades across the scene. But that being said, there are also, there's the Music Workers Alliance, which is a music workers center here in New York City, which I don't know if I emphasized. I live in New York. And then there's also the Union of Music Workers and, can't talk. The Union of Musicians and Allied Workers, which is doing really, really interesting work on more progressive and a bit more radical than the traditional American Federation of Musicians. But then there's also the AFM Local 802, which I'm a member of, and really working to add more praxi and solidarity oriented training and coalition amongst music workers. So there's a lot of people within that field of work that I'm really interested in having on and coming in and shooting the shit and talking about all of this, these sorts of matters, in an organic, chill way. But yeah, there's also some overlap with the labor movement as a whole. So there are a lot of other laborers who will definitely be coming on to talk about things. To sort of get into the last area, I'm really interested in philosophy, and I'm not a philosopher myself, but I love reading and learning philosophy. Specifically really into existentialism, humanism, Buddhism, Marxism, anarchism, social ecology, postmodernism. These are all various schools of thought that I find some kinship or some interest, and so there will definitely be some philosophical discussions and conversations coming from all of this. And last but not least, I'm a big fucking nerd. So like, I'm gonna have people just talking about science fiction and horror movies and comic books and all that kind of stuff. I love that world. I said last but not least, but also meditation. Very interested in meditation, which seems completely random to say after saying science fiction and horror, but whatever. So yeah, so to conclude this introduction ramble that I am putting out into the interwebs, is that there's a lot of areas of interest, lot of areas lots of areas that I find interesting, and I've had the luxury of getting to know and meeting so many people involved in these various spaces, that I just think it's worth it to begin having the discussion of like, all right, like I'm gonna have a fucking podcast and just bring people on to shoot the shit, because there's lots of areas of interest and lots of conversations that can definitely take place. And it's looking forward to using this as a home base to talk about some things that that I really do think will benefit the world to have these conversations out there. And so last but not least, I am not using Patreon, at least at this point. I actually am part of a musicians co-op, Ampled, which is really a musician's version of Patreon, but it's collectively owned. Patreon will take a cut from the artists, from the content creators. And there's a tier program, which can be a little complicated for the creators as well as the supporters. Ampled is a collectively organized platform, and there are no tiers. It is just simply whatever you feel you can donate. There's a minimum of $3, but you can donate $3 a month to help support this show and support this work. But if you go to www.ample.com/artist/Dorian Wallace, again, that's www.ample.com/artist/Dorian Wallace. It'll be a good a good place to throw any extra money you might have. The way I think about it is that $3 a month really comes to $36 a year, which is one $20 bill, one $10 bill, and one $5 bill, and one $1 bill. So that is very, very little money in the grand scheme of it. And so if that's something you can afford, just for $3 a month, or more, I'm not going to complain about more than that. But I do ask just for any support that you may be able to offer, so that I can really put more time and effort and focus into this podcast and really grow this into something meaningful for a lot of people. So again, my name is Dorian Wallace, and this show is called Dorian's Mode. Check me out at www.dorianwallace.com, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.